last year when he talked to Peter Garrett of Midnight Oil, he said that he was somewhat influenced, kind of inspired by punk music of the middle and late 70s in Britain. However, he termed it as having no future, or at least that's what he saw it back then, and saw it as somewhat childish. How in your own case, can you identify it all with that sort of a position?
Yeah, well, definitely in the case of the Pistols, it was a pretty nihilistic I think the no future thing equated more with no responsibility. I think that's what it came down to. Not that they didn't want there to be a future, they just didn't want to be part of that future because of what it seemed to be. I was always much more attracted to the more positive bands in punk, mostly the Clash. The Clash, I think, asked a lot of questions instead of just posing in the bondage trousers. Although they did do a lot of posing in bondage trousers at the same time, but I mean the Pistols was really all just sticking two fingers up, I think, at society in general. So I was much more attracted to the Clash and the Jam. Tom Robinson came through at that same period. And we also had something in England, I don't know if they had anything like it in Japan, called Rock Against Racism.
Yeah, sure.
Which is where one of the first sort of organised attempts by musicians to actually do something against. Racism in English society is something that's always existed, and nobody ever speaks about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody's interested about it, except obviously the victims of it. So for a predominantly white, sort of working middle class media, like pop music, to take some responsibility, that encouraged me, and that's what I took my inspiration from.
By the way, I'll be kind of abbreviating the translations. Okay. They'll be all taken down in correct Japanese later. For the time being, we'll just kind of get the general gist across.
じゃあクラッシュとセックスピストルズっていうのはやっぱり全く別物だったんでしょうか。
クラッシュとピストルズが。So do you think they were completely different things? Two different philosophies behind the bands there, the Pistols and the Clash?
Yeah, I do think so, very, very much. I mean, I always felt that the Pistols were just a rock and roll swindle, genuinely so. They were always got the more press because they were the more outrageous, the two bands. But when it actually came down to looking at lyrics and studying what they were on about, the Clash beat the Pistols hands down for not only for good lyrics but for exciting songs, well thought out, if you will, pop songs. If you listen to that I think in 25 years' time we'll be listening to the Sex Pistols and thinking, what was all the fuss about? Whereas I think we'll listen to the Clash LP and still think, well, that's I can see that in the context of the late 1970s. That actually is a lot more of what was happening than what the Pistols were doing. I mean, the Pistols were about kicking out Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin and pushing all that aside. But for what reason? For no other reason than just pushing it aside. Whereas the Clash were part of that, yeah, for sure. No Elvis, Beatles and the Rolling Stones, they were part of that. But they also were looking forward and looking ahead to what is next. And we have got something to do and something to say instead of just kicking everything out and taking a lot of drugs, which seems to be what the Pistols were.
あなた自身がね、もうどうにでもなってしまいという気持ちで暴れまくったってことないんですか？
You never had the desire on your part to just sort of vacantly kind of strike out and kind of go crazy in the same way without any sort of
I think in the heady days of 1977 we all did a lot of daft things. Certainly I have spat at and been spat on by audiences, and it's the most disgusting habit that I've had to wipe spit off my guitar neck, because if you let it dry it goes all flaky. I mean, I've been right down here in the pit. But I mean, also at the same time, I was always been someone who takes more interest in lyrics than anything else, and having spent years deeply admiring people like Smokey Robinson, and to some aspects Simon and Garfunkel as well, and sort of that whole singer-songwriter thing, but thinking, yes, so what? Suddenly Elvis Costello came through at the same time, and there was sort of what can you say, like Jackson Browne with a backbeat, you know what I mean? It really was driving music. So that was equally inspiring to me. fact, Costello was probably, as a songwriter, was the most inspiring thing from that period that still remains with me. You know, I mean, I've come to terms with what happened to the Clash, but I still cannot at all imagine or comprehend the genius of Elvis Costello. The way the man is so consistent, and you know he's made like something stupid like 15 LPs while everybody else has made 6, and they've been consistently good LPs. So that I still admire that. Whereas with the Clash, you know, you can see the decline and learn from the mistakes.
Do you think there has been notable decline in
The Clash?
Yeah.
I think for what they began with them, the promise of them, I think they went a different way to what I was expecting them to go. And I think America has to take some of the blame for that. I think, you know, they did grow up to want to be the Rolling Stones. I think, you know, I'll wait to see what. I wish the new lineup would record something, because then I think until then, it's no point in saying they're dead or alive. Really, we must, you know, wait till what they record next and see what that sounds like. But Costello still continues to amaze me.
エルビス・コステロなんだって。
なんていうのかな、だからその70年代の終わり頃にね、非常にこうコステロの死にインスパイアされてね、でこの人は何よりはね、死の方にこう重点を置くっていう、それでコステロっていうのはもう一貫したクオリティをずっと保ってきたのはもう驚異的だっていうわけで、それに比べてクラッシュのはずっとこうなんていうのかな、低下してきてるわけで、まあなんていうのかな、こうローリングストーンズになるっていう願望がもともとあったかもしれないけども、それにまあアメリカで受けたせいもあるかもしれないし、そういうこともあってね、まあとにかくその新生クラッシュが、まあ、一刻も早く、新しい作品を作ってもらいたい。それでまた再評価したいと。
クラッシュは非常に落ち目になっていますけど、やっぱりそれはミック・ジョーンズが抜けたっていうことがでかかったんでしょうかね。
What do you think is accounted for this decline in the Clash? He terms it a decline in popularity.
No, I don't think it was a decline in popularity, because I think Combat Rock was their biggest selling album. I think it sold millions in America. I think what it was a mixture of trying to please too many people. I mean, up until London Calling, I think everything was on track as far as I could see. But then Sandinista, the attempt to make a really, I think what it was they tried to do too much with one LP. Instead of making a full price triple album, they should have made 3 cheap LPs or 2 cheap LPs, because there's a good LP in Sandinista, like many double and triple albums. There's a good LP of material in it. But it must be very difficult. The Clash began with all the ideals that I admired most in punk, and it must be very difficult to become. I mean, really, the Pistols took the logical way out. You know, they sold 1 million, toured America, and broke up. What do you do after you sell 1 million records and you tour America? What do you do? I don't know. You do the same again, I suppose. So the Clash must have, Joe Strummer and Mick Jones must have been and looked into the face of consumerism and realised that they were on a sort of a roundabout, I suppose. I don't know. But I think in an attempt to get a wider audience, they not watered it down so much, but it's hard to explain, isn't it? But I know that listening to Combat Rock, it could be anybody make Combat Rock. Whereas only one band could have made London Calling, only one band could have made the first 2 albums. You know what I mean? I'm not saying they went bad. I'm just saying they went mainstream.
Well, pandered somewhat to.
Oh, but did they? Didn't I? I don't know. I mean, you have to. I mean, Sandinista, the actual name of the LP. Nobody in England had heard of the Sandinistas until just recently, until America's situation. So they did by naming the LP Sandinista, bring that to a whole public eye. So that they were still trying, but I think Jones and Strummer wanted to do different things, which happens, I suppose, in any relationship.
What do you think Jones wanted to do as opposed to Strummer?
I fear Mick Jones did actually want to become Keith Richards, and I think Joe Strummer was more intent on maintaining the original idealism. I think. I mean, that's again, as an outsider.
あなたがデビューした頃ね、メディアはワンマンクラッシュというふうな呼び方を与えたりしてたんだけど、それが今はもう反対になってしまって、クラッシュがあなたの真似というか方法論を乗っ取ってね、やってるっていう話をちょっと聞いたんですけど、実際のところどうなんですか？
Do you were referred to as a one-man Clash in the beginning, and now he hears rumors to the effect that the Clash has sort of taken on your approach to a certain degree.
Well,
what's the real story here?
Well, I don't know about that. Certainly, I have no. I much prefer the old one-man Clash thing to the new Bob Dylan idea, because the Clash is what inspired me. And although I admit to listening to Bob Dylan, I admit to realising that Bob Dylan made a lot of good records and had a lot of good ideas. The Clash are a lot closer to what I feel much more affinity to the Clash idea. But as for them busking in England, they've been playing with acoustic guitars and stuff like that. I don't know, maybe that's just to get publicity. I did a gig with them in the Style Council about a month ago in Denmark, a big festival, and I got the opportunity. I mean, I know Paul Weller quite well, I meet him quite often, but I've only met Strummer twice, and I got the opportunity to chat to him about rock and roll and whatever's what, and he seemed interested in what I was doing. He didn't really seem to know much about what I was doing, so obviously the Clash aren't scared by me coming along and nicking their market. But I still think that new Clash or no, the sort of groundwork that they did for a lot of us, not just me, but a lot of bands, a lot of young bands in England, we do owe them a lot, and it's really not for me to sit here and say how they've gone down the tube so much. I find it still, I still find them exciting live, even with the new members. They still, they still play the songs. And so really, it's all, for me anyway, it's wait and see the next record.
One thing I suppose we should get cleared up is you keep saying that you have more in common with the Clash than you would with, say, Dylan. That's taking it for granted that we know what the original motivation of the Clash was. What exactly are you referring to?
Well, I mean, in 1977, everybody was singing about being on the dole and being in a country that didn't care, being in a country where there was no future. In 1977, there were under 1 million people unemployed in the United Kingdom. Now there are 4 million people. 25% of everybody under 21 is unemployed. We are faced with, in 77 there was a Labour Socialist government. Now we have a Conservative government, the strongest government we've ever had. Their power in Parliament is based solely on the Falklands War, on winning the Falklands War. And they are taking away our civil liberties, bit by piece by piece. So what inspired the Clash is now history. But the lessons from them were that you can make contemporary rock music with lyrics, social lyrics. It doesn't have to be like James Taylor. That was the great lesson to me. The other great lesson that is still important to me is that you can do it all yourself. You can do it, just one man and a small record company, and you don't have to charge the earth for video. You don't have to make videos. You don't have to make expensive records. That which is very strongly part of Billy Bragg, all comes from punk.
So the voice of concern, voice of anger.
Yeah.
なんていうか、ボブ・ディランよりニューボブ・ディランなんて言われてるけどね、ボブ・ディランよりクラッシュの方になんていうのかな、考え方は似てると。でそればっかり言ってきてるからね、一体その考え方とは何かって今問いかけてみた。でそれを延々と説明してくれる。だからなんていうのかな、1977年にクラシカル出てきた必然性っていうのは、あの時の失業者が非常に多くて、でそれにイギリス人そのなんていうのかな、大衆の人権がこう奪われつつあって、だからそのなんていうの、怒りの声っていうか、その関心の声っていうか、そういったなんていうかベースでもってクラシカル活動を開始したと思うんだけども、僕の動機はそれに似たようなもんだ。今そのなんていうのかな、現状はそれほど向上してるとは言えないから、失業者だってその4倍にもなってるし、今のイギリスの政権だってフォークランド戦争を勝ったことによって、これだけの、権力を握ってるわけだ。だからこの現状は良くないからこそ僕は立ち上がった。
あなたがそういうふうな活動の自分の基盤にしているね、 労働者階級とかね、あるいはその大衆というふうな言葉の中にさ、例えばクラッシュなんかだと比較的その、インテリの反抗というかさ、中流階級の反抗というかね、その本当に貧しいから立ち上がるんだというふうなジャムみたいな要素がそれほどなかったと思うんだけど、あなたのそういう環境っていうのはどうなんですか？
Comparing to groups like the Clash and the Jam, he says the Jam seemed to be more the working class, whereas the Clash seemed to represent more of a rebellion on the part of the middle class. I don't know if you would agree with that or not. What about in your own case, your own environment?
Well, I think the difference was I think the Clash came out of the art school sort of band, which is like a very famous way for young middle class kids to get into rock and roll. Whereas the Jam came on solely on the inspiration of Paul Weller, the son of a builder from south of London. So there's the difference. For my part, I never went to college or university or anything like that, so I would be more of the Jam way of doing things. And except I think the Jam spent a bit too much time on perfection of style, whereas I don't really care too much about style. It's content, I believe, and not form. So that there is, and it's funny. Many of the bands from that period you could look and say that about. I mean, the Sex Pistols were art school. The art school inspired everyone, and the members were, I suppose, Johnny Rotten and McLaren were art school. And but there's always been that sort of strange division. There tends to be the more deep and meaningful bands tend to be out, Japan and Joy Division and bands like that. Well, yeah, that sort of art school student type bands, the Smiths, things like that. Whereas the more pokey bands like Sham 69 and the Skids and stuff like that all tend to be just working class bands. But they're listened to by everybody. There's no, we don't not listen to them just because they're middle class or whatever.
What about in your own case? What about your own background?
Working class, straightforwardly working class. My parents both worked when I was young. My father worked for builders merchants, selling manhole covers and stuff. Mother worked for a bank. And I went to a secondary modern school. Left when I was 16, first opportunity, with very few qualifications. My brother's a bricklayer, built out. Sort of average suburban upbringing, no different in east of London, no different to anything else.
But no struggles or major frustrations as a result of the background?
Struggles and major frustrations. No more than the average kid in suburbia faces, sort of like getting knocked around a bit at school and being under peer group pressure about smoking and driving and meeting girls, all of which I failed to do. So I suppose so. That there is, the only thing I've ever been good at is playing the guitar and writing songs. So it's just as well as what my job is.
金持ちだったの？貧乏人？
っていうより労働階級っていうか、ごくごくなんていうのかな、普通の労働階級のなんていうか育ち方をしたんだけども、でその答えの前半だけども、中流階級と労働階級のなんていうのを比べてもしょうがないわけ。例えばクラッシュはその中流階級っていうんじゃなくて、アートスクール出身派っていうのかな。だいたいイギリスのバンドっていうのはその2つの派に分けることができるわけ。労働階級出身か、アートスクール出身か、そのどっちか。でセックスピストルズとかジャパンとか。
ジャムとか。
いや、ジャムは労働階級。でもピストルズの方は逆にアートスクール派。
ああ、そうか。
マルコム・マクラーレンにしてもジョニー・ロットにしても大体なんていうのかな、そういう系統が
分かれると。
分かれるっていう、いや2人ともね、このアートスクールの方に属されるので、
2つあるから、そういう比較というかそういう分類の仕方の方がいいってこと？
その分類仕方が正しいと。
いや、彼のだからもっとね、その幼少時の家庭環境とかさ、経済環境みたいなこと聞きたいんだけど。
ある程度聞いたけど、具体的にどういう？
もっと詳しく子供の頃はね、貧乏だったとか、周りに貧乏人がいっぱいいて自分の方が裕福だったとか、それで心を悩ました経験があるとかね。
He wants to delve a little bit more into your past.
Okay. What's going on?
You outlined it a little bit there. Like, for example, when you were a kid, you pretty much grew up, I guess, surrounded by kids, a lot of kids mostly like you, and were working class and whatnot. So it was basically not a matter of you being from an economically inferior or superior background. It was just
No, not really. I mean, when I grew up in the when I left school in 1974, if you wanted to get a job, you could go to Ford's at Dagenham, big motor plant at Dagenham. You could get work on the line at Ford's, no problem, really easy, and get £100 a week, which was a lot. Also, if you wanted to go into work in an office, all you really had to do was buy a suit. It wasn't that difficult. The only thing you needed a lot of qualifications for was if you wanted to go to university. But that very quick. I mean, the writing was already on the wall in the mid-70s. You know, the oil crisis had come, and now that's changed horrendously. I mean, I sort of towards since 1980 went through a number of real dead-end jobs of working in shops and washing up in restaurants. I joined the army for a while. You know, it's just like nothing, no future. If it hadn't been for what, you know, all the time I was playing and sort of looking, as Oscar Wilde said, our feet in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. So that was sort of the idea that kept me going was that one day I'd be able to make a living doing this. So no, I wouldn't say I had any particular hardships. Obviously, there was kids in our neighbourhood who had more than one bike, and whose parents had colour TVs and stuff like that. But I didn't ever grow up thinking, you know, I am inferior. Only physically.
ちょっと話題を変えてですね、あなたは、まあこれは大体答えが嘘つくんですが、自分の活動、音楽活動全部含めてね、それが政治的なプロパガンダだというふうに、言われることに対してどう思いますか？
He thinks he can envision your answer, but still he'll go ahead and ask the question anyway. Your songs are sometimes labeled as propagandist. He's using the word propaganda, but I think maybe sloganeering would probably be closer. How would you usually respond?
Well, I would say that sloganeering doesn't offer any room for contradiction. I mean, I think in my songs I try and have a more open mind and taking a bit more of ideas. I certainly, I'm a socialist by definition. I'm a member of the Labour Party, Great Britain. But I'm not foolish enough to think the Labour Party have all the answers. I'm not foolish enough to imagine that we're going to change the world after Margaret Thatcher's government. So I want my songs to appeal to people who are realists, pragmatists, and realise that as politics affects them, and in England at the moment politics does affect young people and old people the worst, because they're the most prone to government cuts, then I want them to listen and think, well, you know, I should get involved, you know.
What there?
Oh.
I think I want people who listen to my songs to think that they should get involved. I think if we were just sloganeering, then everything would be a lot simpler, and I could say, you know, this is black and that is white. Whereas I don't feel I can do that, because I can't see how that is so. In politics, it's very, very seldom so.
Just out of curiosity, though, how do people get involved? I mean, how do people change things?
Well, there's a number of ways to do it now. You take more of an interest in politics and in your workplace, in the trade union. If you're not working, there are there's in the Labour Party in Great Britain has a youth wing called the Young Socialists, and they organise benefits and put on gigs and mobilise feeling, organise feeling. I think it's through organisation. I mean, that's just the way our fathers always did it, exactly the same way, through organising together, not through sitting at home and smashing up your room and taking heroin because you can't stand it anymore. You go out and you communicate with other people, and you realise it's not just you who feels as if you're fucked by society, it's everybody. So you get together, and the more people you can get together, the louder you can express your thing, the more chance you have, maybe, of people taking notice. If not the opposition taking notice, then your side taking notice and listening to your voice, and therefore constructing a policy for that includes you in instead of being on the outside. It's getting people from the outside to come in and make their voice heard. By that, whether that's young people or black people, old people, handicapped people. If we exclude them, then they will suffer. I know that for a fact, because that's what the Conservatives do. So it's very important that we listen and involve everybody.
Again, some of the most severe criticism leveled at the youth of Britain is that they lack any sort of organization, power to organize.
Yeah.
Lots of racism rampant among the young, just a failure to get together with people on the basis of age or even political ideals.
Well, I think that's something that I hope is changing. Margaret Thatcher presents probably the biggest challenge to young people of the last, I would say, 25 years. And it's something that affects, again, all of us, whatever colour we are, whatever income even. It's even put in middle class kids, university places are just going. Whatever. It's something for us all to push against. Part of my job is to define what it is and how we can organise. It's part of my job to say, look, this is happening and this is happening. Now we can organise like that. And I base my ideas on my experiences during the miners' strike last year about what music can, what music can't do. I don't think music can change the world, but it can focus people's ideas well. Well, where did you start?
今の答え。
答えはどう？
答えはなかった。そのなんていうのかな。
まあ大体プロパガンダじゃないってこと言ったんでしょ。
っていうかそうそのなんていうのかな。そういう批判に対して、そのなんていうのかな。
でスティーブなんか言ったじゃん、メディアがそういうふうに使って色分けするけどどうのこうのって。
僕が聞いたのはね、イギリスの若者っていうのはね、非常に組織力に欠けてるっていう、そういう批判はよくされるんだけど、なぜかそういう方向になってしまった話が。
U2 のボノなんかのインタビューするとね、その政治的な細かい事項を彼にポンポン聞いていくと、自分はそういうことをよく分かんないんだと実は、ということを言い出すわけ。だからその政治的なそのメッセージソングを歌ったからといって、それは必ずしも政治についてすごく勉強してて、政治的な方針を自分で打ち出してね、他人に与えてるっていうんじゃないんだということを言うんですけども、つまりその自分のパッションがたまたま政治に向かってるんだということに過ぎないということを言ってるんですが、あなたの立場というか方法もやっぱりそうですか
？Talking to Bono of U2 there, he, when you counter him with individual political ideas, he kind of evades the question and is not reset. He admits outright that he doesn't know about this, doesn't know about that. He just basically somehow it takes his energy takes a sort of a political direction, I guess, in the form of his persona as a musician. How about in your own case? It's not that sort of a vague stance in your situation.
No, well, it doesn't have to be in my stance, in my situation, because I have more direct experience, if you will, of the socialist ideas in the UK through people organised and how it's all it's not about revolutionaries and it's not about armed struggle and crap like that. It's about ideas, and in the end, it's about people's happiness. That I was inspired to find out more. In fact, I think I was radicalised by the strike, and I came away at the end of it thinking it's really going to be a pity if these sort of political type gigs end with the strike. How can we carry on that? And so I felt that by doing gigs with the Labour Party and encouraging the Labour Party to look at young people in a different light, and encouraging young people to look at the Labour Party in a different light, that we could have an ongoing thing at least to the next general election. Now to do that, I had to create common meeting place. So we used my gigs, and at those gigs we had a couple of Labour Party members of Parliament who didn't speak on stage, but I introduced them to the audience and started a show. And then they went and stood by the t-shirt stall or in the foyer, and they were just saying, a little badge with their name was. And they chatted to some kids gave them a real hard time, others just ignored them. You know, we weren't trying to ram politics down people's throats. We were trying to give it a high profile. But it was had to be up to young people to look at that. So obviously I wouldn't be able to do all this if I didn't have a definition of the Labour Party and a definition of their goals. I don't agree with them on everything, but then again, that's my right as a member. I'm not an automaton, or neither am I a spokesman for them. Really, I'm just a geezer who happens to be a member of that party. So I do feel that a lot is lost by people refusing to face up to facts and speaking about facts. I think the Live Aid thing, for instance, to get all those musicians together to actually make a statement that this is wrong. I don't care what any of them says. I think it was a political statement, because that the situation in Africa can only be, I think it can only be solved by political means. I don't think Live Aid or anything like that is going to solve the problem. It's certainly going to help out. I don't think it's going to solve it. Really, I mean, rock musicians are among some of the most irresponsible people in the world, just by the nature of the job. That it encourages you to be a bit irresponsible. So to see him taking that responsibility, I thought that's a pretty good thing. And in my own little way, it's something that I try and do, not to the detriment of what I do normally. There has to be. I don't sort of like politics all the time, because I think politics is really boring, and I'd rather be singing about I don't know, whatever, girls and cars, but whatever, not whatever I normally sing about. But the situation at the moment in England demands. I mean, I'm a contemporary songwriter. I have to reflect the society I come from at the very least. So I'll just maybe go into it a bit more depth than some other people.
One of the great ironies that always occurs to me is that I guess it was about 2 weeks ago. There was when U2, I think U2 is still touring America, but we're talking to the audience. What do you like about U2? And it's like people are saying, "Oh, I like the message, man." What the hell is the message?
Yeah,
there's a lot of political posturing, and it kind of sort of gets close to the point.
I don't know what the message is.
Yeah.
I really don't.
I mean, the song about Martin Luther King, I remember I wrote a thing in Japanese about the lyrics. Where's the message? Yeah, what is it? I really don't understand.
And I think there's a great, the lesson for me to be learned from 1967 was that singing songs and holding hands and singing "Give Peace a Chance" and "All You Need Is Love" is not going to change anything. You change things by raising people's consciousness, and you raise people's consciousness by the discussion of ideas. So first you have to communicate those ideas. So what I'm doing really, bottom line, is communicating my political ideas to the audience, asking them at the same time to take those away and look at them as just one man's point of view, not as gospel truth, and take it like Frankie says this and Billy Bragg says that, and you make your mind up. Some people agree with me, other people don't agree with me, and it's the people who don't agree with me that I want to play gigs to, and I want to ask these questions to, and I want to face and see what I think. So that is really the challenge to it all, and while this job remains a challenge, I'll remain doing it.
面白そうな話でしたね、今のね。
じゃあだからちょっとこうさっきの質問に伊藤から外れてしまったから、僕はさらに突っ込んでみたから話をカバーした。
はい。あなたは自分のオーディエンスとかファンにね、そのティーンエイジャーとか若い子たちの自分のファンに対してその歌ってる時に将来この人たちが一体どういう人になってほしいと思いますか？
What do you hope becomes of the people who buy your records and come to see you and your fans generally? What do you
in Japan or
anywhere? I mean, what do you expect of these kids? What would you like
I expect them to listen and to go away. I expect them to be open-minded about things. I don't expect them to accept everything I say as the absolute literal truth. I don't expect them to hero worship me. I don't expect them to sort of form themselves into cadres of political lunatics and go off and storm the Winter Palace. I try and break down the barriers between myself and the audience as much as possible, and I expect them to give me a fair chance, I suppose. I think that'd be the best way to explain. That's what I expect. But I don't really know who my audience are. We never haven't managed to define it. We seem to get everyone from the little girls down at the front to the polytechnic lecturers up the back with bald heads and beards who nod sagely. And folk songs, Between the Wars, I heard at a folk festival the other day by a traditional English band playing hurdy-gurdies and sack butts and old things like that, sung between the wars. Really strange.
Yeah.
So I want to live in some ways. I want to live in a classless, raceless, and in some ways sexless society, and I expect my audience to reflect that. Maybe it's a lot to expect, but that's what I'd like to think.
ちょっと教えて。
なんだっけな、何になってほしいかってこと、誰が聞いてるかっていうのはまずこう今一つよくわからない、こうミーハー的な女の子からね、こう大学の教員みたいなやつまでがね聞いてるからよくわからないけども、まあその人種差別、男女差別、まあそういったもののない、将来をこうなんていうのかな、もう目指してるからね、そういう将来になるように皆さんにこう、頑張ってもらいたいと。
デビュー前にあなたは3ヶ月間ほど戦車を運転してたって話を聞いたんですが、その時に運転している快感はありましたか？
You apparently had been driving around in a tank.
I was in the army for 3 months.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And then
That's when I was driving
did you
around.
feel any thrill from driving around?
Well, yeah, that's why I joined the army, to drive a tank. That's the whole point. But I realised very soon that when you've driven one tank, you've driven them all. So I didn't see any point. I don't know. I think the time in the army was like a sabbatical for me. Took me away from a no-win situation, sitting in my mother's house in London, washed up at the age of 22, and threw me into the absolute opposite of everything I've ever done and believed in. And it redefined for me how lucky I was to be doing what I was doing at home. So sort of like in and out, it was like a cleansing experience, I suppose. It was like a sabbatical. I did enjoy it. And I wouldn't recommend it to anybody, but I did definitely come away feeling the better for it.
Given the fatigues and I guess the feeling of camaraderie and tanks and the arms and whatnot, do you think you can understand the position of a kid who finds himself being sent to war and kind of justifying the whole thing?
Well, we're less than a year later the Falklands War occurred, and I realised then that my regiment didn't go, but so there's no, I wouldn't have gone. But there were a lot of kids down there who joined the army for the same reasons as me, not to kill people, but to get away from home, to get a career, to try and have some sort of life outside of England and see the world, and for that same sort of being part of the bunch. I mean, for instance, HMS Sheffield, which was the first warship we lost, the Exocet missile hit the galley and killed all the cooks. Now, you're not telling me that a kid learns catering in the British Navy. He learns it so he can go back into Civvy Street and be a caterer, because he knows he's going to, see the world and generally have a good time. He didn't end up in the icy South Atlantic for Margaret Thatcher to win the next general election. That was when I realised really coldly that the reality. I mean, I realised while I was there that this was about killing people, because you were using these killing machines. You can see what they do. But when I actually was reading news reports about what was going on down there, I realised once and for all that the Thatcher government was going to change that country, possibly for good. And something had to be done about it.
気持ちが良かったかどうかっていうのは、運転すること自体が気持ちいいって言ってた。
How about actually experiencing army life? Were there any pleasures?
There was pleasure in the floor being so clean that we could see our face. I mean, you see that the whole idea of being in the British Army is very amateur brainwashing. They take you in, they cut you in, and the first 5 weeks you're not allowed off the base, you're not allowed out of uniform, you're not allowed home. So for that 5 weeks they tell you your shit every day. Everything you do, doesn't matter how good it is, they tell you your shit. And they just wear you down, shit. And they let you home for a weekend. When you come back, they let you have your radio, they let you wear clothes after work, and they start telling you, you're good, you're good. And because you're so sick of being told your shit, you respond like a little puppet. You know, you sort of perk up and you try harder. And it's real rudimentary brainwashing. So yeah, I mean there was a pleasure in not having my bed thrown out the window in the morning because I made the bed properly. And there was a pleasure in running in a team and winning. But it wasn't, the things that really put me off were the martial things, you know, the marching and the discipline. And for me the discipline was to I knew that the only way I could win in this situation was to do everything they asked me, do it well, and at the end of the day turn around and say, that's not me that's shit, it's you and your system, and I'm leaving. And that's what I did. And if I'd left in the first week, I'd have gone back to exactly the same, having learnt nothing. As it was, I learnt that the individual is stronger than the group if he can keep his will. You know, it's very simple psychology, and I must say there was once I got there was never any time when I considered staying at all. But having said that, every day I tried in every way to be the model recruit, and although I didn't make best recruit, I did come in the top 3, and I also was in the top crew. That's where you're in 4 of us in a room. Our room 1, the whole sort of 90-day thing. And I have a little certificate at home that I'm very proud of, because I know that I sweated blood for that, kicked ass for that, and I did it. And I didn't just go there for the ride. I did the whole thing, came away, and walked away at the end.
Probably the only musician I've ever met who has done time in service like that.
I think Gene Vincent was in the Navy.
A few years back.
Yeah, I think so.
I remember Elvis did that.
Elvis did too, yeah. Costello.
Not in the army, I know. All of his army. Yes.
All of his army, yes. Yeah, it was. I will admit it was a strange experience, but then I've always been attracted to the absolute opposite of what I do, to find out what it's like. I mean, I think the rock dream that I am part of is the opposite of most people's rock dream, and I find it a lot more challenging and a lot more interesting than if we were sat in hotels taking loads of drugs and throwing TVs at them. Because I've seen that done and it looks real boring.
話がまたちょっと変わってくれますが、いろんな面でポール・ウェラーと仲がいいようで、ポール・ウェラーのこの前の NME のインタビューでビリー・ブラックが最高だと褒めてましたけども、プライベートの部分でも馬があったりするんですか？
プライベート部分で何？
馬が合うっていうか、気心が知れるというかね。
You're apparently on good terms with Paul Weller. In fact, in a recent NME interview you read, Paul Weller praised you. You basically get along in private life as well.
Well, no, I mean I don't really know him in private. I mean I don't really know many rock stars. I mean I don't inhabit the rock star scene, but I do a lot of gigs. I mean I did like 250 gigs last year. So you do meet a lot of musicians. And to tell you the truth, I've always admired the Jam. And when I got the opportunity to do the first Style Council tour, opening for the Jam, for the Stylies, I sort of jumped at it and watched Paul Weller the first night in the Wings, shaking like a leaf, and about the new Style Council, about doing something new live for the first time. And I learned a lot about rock stars and rock and roll proper from Weller, because he is a rock star in England. He's massive.
Yeah.
And he still remains some sort of normality, some semblance of normality. So I learnt a lot sitting on the bus, watching Weller drive around with the new Style Council. And we both share similar political views, not exactly the same, quite similar. And we were both involved in different ways again in the miners' strike. Obviously, it's very easy for me to go and play in a little club in North England. It's not easy for the Style Council, so I did a lot more of what I can do, and he did the big gigs and made the big money. So yeah, we meet very often on those sort of terms, at gigs, in situations where I'm trying to get him to do something, or he's trying to get me to kind of do something with the Style Council. I go down to, they've got their own studio near Marble Arch, and I go down there and sit in. But actually socialising with rock stars, I've done, unless we're on tour, unless we're unless we're on a bus with that kind of Bunnyman and driving around America, which was the first time I went to America. Then I would, But other than that, I mean, I'll probably definitely have a chat with lots of local stars because I admire their music and I like them. But to tell you the truth, if we were playing with the Scorpions down there or with Spandau Ballet, I probably wouldn't have two words to say.
But why do you think it is you don't socialize much with other musicians?
Because
Try to keep it business-like?
no, it's just I mean the things I enjoy doing, I don't think I enjoy much. I've never been a particularly hard drinking man, nor have I ever been one for dressing up smooth and going down to discos. And I don't see why I should. I mean, a lot of that is involved in going out and being seen, and I don't particularly like the idea of that being seen. You know what I mean? I like if I'm standing waiting for a train in the underground station in London, someone comes up to me and says, "I really like your record, mate." That's fine. It's great. I don't mind that. But actually going out and acting out a rock star thing. Fame is something very, very frivolous. I think. What's famous to one person is fuck all to another person, and I'd rather be, sort of. I'd rather be people enjoy what I do, which is doing gigs. If they want to see me come to the gigs, they usually speak to me at gigs. I wander around watching the bands. It's no great.
Just more.
No, I don't really know none of those sort of pop star.
スタイルカウンシルのことは何つってたの？ジャムからスタイルカウンシルっていうか。
それ自体について触れなかったんだけど、要するにそのポール・ウェラーを非常に尊敬してるし、それでそのスタイルカウンシルの初のツアーの時の前座を務めたんだけども、あの時ポール・ウェラーが一番最初の時にもうなんていうのかな、震えてたわけ、ステージの上で。でずっと彼を見ることによって、勉強になった。しかしプライベートの面においてはほとんど交流はない。ポール・ウェラーに限らずに他のミュージシャンと、俺は酒飲まないし、それで、人にねじろじろ見られるのはあまり好きじゃないから、どうもあんまり共通点がない。
要するにロックスターの生活はしてないけど。
全くもうそれからかけ離れた生活を送ってる。
Sort of musicians I socialise with are more like sort of smaller bands anyway, bands like the Redskins, who are London, political band called the Boot Hill Foot Tappers, who are sort of hillbilly, American hillbilly music, and they come round my house and we might sit and have a jam and listen to some records. That's what I enjoy doing. So.
付き合ってるミュージシャンいるとすれば非常になんていうかローカルのマイナーなミュージシャンと
working musicians as opposed to working pop stars.
スタイルカウンシルのジャムからの転身についてね、いろんなミュージシャンにそれを聞いてみると、確かにその変わったということはね、思い切ってやめてしまったということは賞賛に値する、かっこいいというふうに言ってるんだけども、音楽の方は趣味的になってつまんないということを言ってる人がかなりいますが、あなたは彼らのスタイルカウンシルの音楽っていうのはジャムに比べて自分自身どういう、接し方というか、どの程度評価しますか？
I guess it's sort of irrelevant, but he kind of gets a kick out of asking contemporaries of Paul Weller, what they thought of him quitting jam, or breaking up the jam and starting Style Council. And most people say, it's a very courageous thing, a neat thing he did, et cetera, et cetera. But then when it comes time to speaking on the music, they say it's rather dull stuff. How about in your own case? How would you size up the?
Well, I think it best reflected in that gig I did with the Clash and the Style Council. It was so obvious that Joe Strummer was trapped. He felt trapped in being in the Clash and was going through the motions. Because if you watch Weller, he was so enjoying himself so much. I can't think of any more justification for forming the Style Council. And they're pretty good live. I don't know if you've ever seen them live. But they're pretty. I enjoy them live more than I do on record. And I think you should judge the Style Council as being experimental, not being a mainstream rock thing, but being quite experimental for a young mod from Woking to actually get out there and mess around with instrumentals and a few polyrhythms here and there. You shouldn't sort of like, you know, the fact that they get into the charts and are also, I think, is a measure of Weller's ability with lyrics and ability to make good records. You know, I don't think you should judge them if you judge it with a jam, then obviously, you know, I mean, I love the jam more than I probably love the Style Council, but there's two very, very different things. And I'm sure Weller will tell you if you ask him that he didn't break up the jam to form the new jam. He broke up the jam to form the Style Council. And I think to see if something different would work. And I think it may be a while before it comes to anything solid that we can say this is the Style Council.
じゃあ最後あと3つぐらいなんですが
Still about 3 more questions to go.
Okay.
If you're with your
Fine,
indulgence.
it's fine.
20億人にアピールしてしまったバンドエイド、ライブエイドについて、一連のムーブメントに関してあなたはどういうふうな、考え方を持ってますか？
さっきちょっと言った。You commented a little while ago on Live Aid. He wanted to get your comments now. I guess maybe he didn't catch that.
Well,
do you think you commented?
It was the responsibility we were talking about.
Yeah,
Wasn't it? About pop stars taking a little more responsibility about. I don't believe music will change the world, but the aspects of Live Aid that most appealed to me was the global village aspect of it, of bringing together different cultures, and to see someone like David Bowie, who you'd never, I wouldn't anyway think of being giving 2 fucks about whatever else was happening in the world, to see him. Again, I thought that was quite a good performance from him. I thought that was very encouraging. The bad side of it all, I think, was seeing Bob Dylan. I think he stayed up for the whole thing, but seeing Dylan being unable to remember the third verse of Blowing in the Wind and those 2 junkies with him. I mean, that I think was bad irony. Good irony was Spandau Ballet playing there. I mean, again, a band you wouldn't think would have any responsibility, so it pleased me to see them there.
There's such a thing as exposure.
No. I mean, you know, there's also such a thing as standing up and being counted, and I was among the first to say when the original Band Aid project came together, it's all just publicity. But there comes a time when you have to look back and think, well, you know, Bob Geldof has earned the right to look Margaret Thatcher in the face and say, you're committing a sin. So that cannot be a bad thing, and to continue, you know, to help raise money and to continue to ask this question, why are people starving and we're spending all this money on weapons? You know, it has to be a good thing. There's obviously ways it could have been done better and ways it could have been more political, but then again, I think to involve the Russians and the Americans, you have to make some concessions to, in inverted commas, entertainment. And I think it was very interesting to find. Did you see the Russian?
Yeah.
It was very interesting to see that it's not only the West that has to put up with crappy bands like Foreigner, the Russians have to put up with them as well.
Russo Funk guy.
Wasn't it terrible? And the guy who made his little speech before. Oh, did you see the German?
No, I didn't.
One? Maybe they didn't. They
didn't show that here.
Maybe not. No, the Germans made a speech. It was translated into English, but it went on for about 5 minutes, which accused the Americans and the Russians of spending money on arms and spending it, and blamed them directly for the situation in Ethiopia. Whilst we all sat at home in England going, wow, this is really good. And God knows, they're probably kicking their televisions in America probably, and the Russians are probably switching off transmission all over the world. But the only bad aspects is how do you follow it, or how do you continue it, or how do you keep that sort of the ideals of it going without keeping the circus aspect of it going, you know.
You better get down to the last question.
あと2つなんだけどさ、次はちょっとバカな質問なんで、ちょっと愚問かもしれないんでね、そう思ったら笑ってくださって構わないんですが、今までぶっ殺したいと思った人がいますか
？You can consider this a silly question and laugh it off if you wish. He's wondering if you've ever been so incensed or disliked somebody so much that you'd like to do away with them.
Do away with them? Well, there was for a while, a long time, a feeling of mine that to terminate the career of Margaret Thatcher once and for all could do Great Britain a lot of good. But when the actual situation arose in Brighton, and when nearly half the cabinet were blown up, it was made so obvious to me that what would happen if Margaret Thatcher and her cabinet died was that the army would take over, or at least people's liberties would be severely curtailed. But I found that, whether you're talking about being offended by Margaret Thatcher or being offended by Duran Duran, in the end you can only defeat these people with better ideas. And I think I'm a better idea than Duran Duran. I think socialism is a better idea than Thatcherism. So I think that's
as close as you get.
I think it is, in the end, if you think about it. Because otherwise, anyone whoever it is becomes a martyr. So you can't really justify it anyway, can you?
じゃあ最後の一つ、戦車に乗る前にあなたはその乗った動機としてね、すごく自分が無気力になってたという、だからそれを打破するためにもそういうことをやってみたんだという話をしてましたけども、今後自分がそういうふうに無気力になることは絶対ないという、そういう自信は今ありますか？
You talked about being washed up at the age of 22 and that being your motivation for joining your army. Can't see that happening to you again, like feeling that you're washed up or feeling that you're wasted.
Well, it depends. It depends how you determine your career, doesn't it? I mean, at the moment, whatever your definition of success is, my definition of success is doing the job I always wanted to do and getting paid for it. My definition of success is coming to Japan for 3 weeks when my brother and all his friends are having to work. It's raining in the end of the day. I know that for a fact because we rang it up early. My definition of success is not playing Budokan and selling 1 million records. If I end up at Budokan, if I end up selling 1 million records, fair enough, okay. Whether or not that will make me a better person or make my songs any better, I very much doubt. I have a sneaking suspicion that I have more value, more ideas, more ideals, and more hope of carrying those ideals through, doing it my way. So I'm in quite a pleasant position. I used to hate it, but now I'm in a pleasant position, not knowing what I want, and continually having interesting things occurring. I've just had news from England. There's a big festival, International Youth in Athens, again with the Style Council next month. So there's always something for me to look forward to, going back to America again. But it's a huge challenge, America, Christ, for me. I mean, just for any artist, but for political artists in America at the moment, the challenge is immense. We have Australia coming up in March. I mean, maybe my career has peaked already. I don't particularly care one way or the other. I still feel now some justification in feeling that I speak for the individual, and for the fact that the individual will out against everything in the end if he can keep his mind and his will away from the obvious temptations of huge record advances, of the equation that volume equals power in songs, and stuff like that, So I don't know what the end result will be, but I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it.
No, it's great. That's all this.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Thank you. One thing I wanted to ask you, what time will you be going on today?
I'm not sure. Is it 6:30?
Around 6:30.
For half an hour. Yeah, do try and come to Shibuya as well at Sunday week, because that'll be my last gig, and I will have hopefully sussed out a bit how to deal with the Japanese audience by then. Because at the moment, I'm still sort of feeling my way around,
So it's always kind of a